Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of CleanTechnica's News Broadcast, the news show where we bring you all the relevant clean tech news of the week in about 20 minutes. My name is Hanan, I'm your host, and this week we again have a bunch of news to cover, so let's immediately get right to it. Lithium production in Germany. Lithium production for lithium-ion batteries is still sometimes a bit of a production constraint, and yet at the exact same time, we hear that lithium is so abundant that we can just collect it from ocean water. The problem is that doing so is not yet economically competitive to the more traditional mining process. However, it seems that the deep waters that are also suitable for geothermal energy production can at the same time be tapped for lithium production at the same price as regular mining in faraway places like Chile or Australia. One such country that could make this transition is Germany. Scientists at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology have found a way to economically extract it from the Upper Rhine Trench, which is right here on the border of France and Germany. Here, let me turn off the border so you see it a bit better. And then here is where Karlsruhe is, a beautiful city to visit if you're ever in the area, by the way. In any case, the scientists claim to have found an economical way of extracting lithium with what they're calling a minimally invasive process. Now, if you're wondering why there is now economical to extract lithium while extracting it from seawater from the ocean isn't, it actually has to do with the fact that this deep underground location has higher concentrations of the element. In fact, there the concentrations are somewhere around 200 milligrams per liter, while in the ocean is only a mere 0.1 to 0.2 milligrams per liter. And while further developments in technology could eventually make extracting lithium from seawater economical as well, it might no longer be necessary. This is a great shortcut to get to where we need to be, and there are also other added bonuses, like the fact that this process can be CO2 neutral because the geothermal power plant where this will be based can be used to actually power the process. There are also other bonuses because in addition to lithium, you can also extract rubidium and cesium through the exact same process. And unlike salt lake or rock mining, it is not weather dependent, and there is no month-long enrichment process. If every geothermal plant in the world can now also start to produce lithium in addition to creating electricity, that would be absolutely fantastic. And the case of Germany, they only produce 42 megawatts of electricity from geothermal energy, and that's apparently enough lithium to sustain all the production needs within that country. And that is actually not a lot because the top 10 countries all produce more than 600 megawatts of electricity from geothermal, and the number one place, the US, actually produces 3,676 megawatts of electricity. Just imagine how much lithium it is. That is way more than is necessary and could be a perfect way to really power the battery revolution. Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. This next story is actually going to start off with a little bit of a rant. You see, there are a ton of accurate, scary climate change stories about what is going on, about what awaits us in a few short years or in the upcoming decades. And then there are also stories that seriously bend the truth. Hyperbole, misinformation, whatever you want to call it. And one of these stories is about the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. So what is really going on? Well, in Antarctica, this glacier here has become unstable and is melting faster and faster. When that collapses, the sea will rise by approximately 61 centimeters or 2 feet. However, that exposes a ton of other ice to warmer water, most of East Antarctica actually, all of which could collapse, which would then raise the sea level by 6 feet or 1.8 meters. However, that explanation misses out a lot of key details and important facts, things that most of the other news stories seem to neglect to mention. Now, according to current estimates, the Thwaites Glacier will collapse within the next 200 to 1,000 years. However, we know scientists can be wrong, so let's take that minimum value of 200 and cut it in half, 100 years. Hell, let's make it 50. That's not what matters, because another key detail that people don't understand is what collapse actually means. Huge bits are melting and separating off of the edges everywhere, more than what refreezes in winter. So we will see a rise in sea level anyways. To which the Thwaites Glacier is currently only contributing something like 4%. And when it finally does collapse, it's not what people think it means. It's not going to all separate and go into the ocean all at once. It's not going to create a mega tsunami. And when it does melt, it's not going to melt in one day, 1 week, or even a month, or even a year. It's not going to create a doomsday situation where you literally have to run for your life for the next 24 to 48 hours. All it means is that the pieces will start breaking off a lot more rapidly, and eventually we won't have a glacier there anymore. Then many decades or even hundreds of years later, East Antarctica could collapse as well. And the reason we need to panic right now is because now we could still do something to slow it down, or maybe even have a small chance left of actually preventing the problem. However, it is not something that's on the horizon, and it's a problem we will be prepared for, because within the next 50 years, sea is already going to rise substantially, enough for people to take this issue seriously. They're not going to buy properties looking at what is going to be safe from sea rise for the next 5 to 10 years. They're going to look at what is going to be safe long term. Slow, systematic withdrawal from the shorelines. It will be a common thing that people are prepared for, and not something that will just happen. Furthermore, having been at the epicenter of a 6.7 magnitude earthquake a few years back, now that is what I call a doomsday. A glacier melting isn't. Climate change is a much slower process than people seem to think. Now, even right now, all the warming we're currently experiencing is not even from stuff we've done recently. Right now, the warming we're feeling is from all the decades, probably before the year 2000 or so. I mean, just wait till the year 2050, then you'll really see. Nissan Arya. Nissan finally unveiled their new Arya this week, and there is some good stuff in there, as well as some bad stuff. Without the prices, it's going to be a bit challenging to properly place it in the market. For reference, the current Leaf E Plus with a 62 kWh battery starts around 37,000 euros. A crossover costs more, so we will start at a price of 40,000 euros. Here are the specs. Feel free to go through them as I start the explanation. Currently, the difference in price between a 40 kWh and a 62 kWh Nissan Leaf is 8,000 euros. So let's make it 7,000 just to be safe, and a motor increase of 3,000 euros for the Arya. They're introducing the vehicle in Japan in the middle of 2021, the US late 2021, and Europe only at some point in 2022, which is a bit ridiculous considering that Europe is by far their most successful market for the Leaf. By then, all the competitors will already have vehicles with 80 kWh batteries. The Tesla Model Y, the Audi Q4 e-tron, the Volkswagen ID4. If the Model Y will have the same price as in the US, then it beats the competition by every single metric. I'll get back to that a bit later. The thing that Nissan seems to be doing, that no one else is doing, is introducing a crossover with a small battery. The only other company doing that is Peugeot with the E2008 for a budget price of around 34,000 euros. That is a niche. The Nissan Arya at a much higher price is not a niche. Charging speeds don't stand out at all. Fast charging at like 130 kilowatt, like the MEB platform, but then making the dumb mistake of giving the rear-wheel drive version an AC charger of only 7 kilowatt instead of 11 kilowatt, or even better, 22 kilowatt like they're doing with their all-wheel drive version. So in the most important category, which is long range, their pricing is right between the Volkswagen ID4 and the Audi Q4 e-tron. The acceleration is pretty good, pretty competitive. The forward-wheel drive long range might have a niche of people afraid to buy rear-wheel drive in countries where there is snow and ice in the winter, but don't want to pay for all-wheel drive. The motor performance is fantastic compared to the Audi e-tron. Same motor output, yet so much better acceleration. You could almost say that it's a bit too good to be true. The Model Y will be either cheaper than the bunch, or more expensive than these vehicles, or somewhere right in the middle. I mean, the Model Y won't come to Europe until Giga Berlin starts producing them locally, so why the US lists a 44,000 euro price and Germany lists a 58,000 euro price is a bit unusual, especially since the Model 3 in China now costs the same as in the US once they started producing them there locally. It's strange. The CleanTechnica staff actually discussed this, and we think that the prices will go down before any sales occur in Europe. Joe Biden's new climate plan. Assumed Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden just announced a $2 trillion climate change plan that is being praised by a lot of people as not everything they had hoped for, but good enough. I mean, obviously anything is better than what Trump offers, which is nothing, but it's still a pretty far cry from the $16 trillion that Bernie Sanders wanted to spend on climate change. Now, the plan does have some pretty good things in it, like a 100% renewable energy sector by 2035 and total climate neutrality by 2050. The plan is heavily focused on jobs and throws around the word millions of jobs many times in there. So, for example, a couple million jobs for infrastructure, millions of jobs in clean energy, a million EV jobs, a million jobs retrofitting buildings. And each of those sentences manages to throw the word union in there somehow. Here are 2 bullet point examples that will show this perfectly. Auto industry. Create 1 million new jobs in the American auto industry. Domestic auto supply chains and auto infrastructure, from parts to materials to electric vehicle charging stations, positioning American auto workers and manufacturers to win the 21st century. And invest in US auto workers to ensure their jobs are good jobs with a chance to join a union. Power sector. Move ambitiously to generate clean American-made electricity to achieve a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035. This will enable us to meet the existential threat of climate change while creating millions of jobs with a choice to join a union. The 14-page plan is not very specific and feels more like a reminder that Joe Biden cares about climate change rather than something entirely new, although the plan is apparently based on the climate change plan of former presidential candidate Jay Inslee, the plan that Greenpeace rated as the best among the presidential candidates. By the way, this is an old image where you see Biden's original climate plan scoring a mere D-, but after Biden updated his plans, he was upgraded to a B+. Now that he has updated his plan yet again, what the score would be is unknown, but considering that the document does talk about fossil fuel phase-out, indigenous sovereignty, environmental justice, it does seem like he's plugging the last holes in his own and Inslee's plan, though that appearances may be deceiving. If anything, Michael Bernard on CleanTechnica made a fantastic analysis of Joe Biden's new plan, comparing it to his previous plans as well as the plans of the other presidential candidates that dropped out. So let's take out the cliff notes of that. So what in this plan is worse than before? No carbon tax, something that he has talked about before but has not mentioned in the new plan. High-power transmission lines to South America, something that would compete with China's Belt and Road Initiative, but could also serve to stabilize South America. But there is a flip side in the next segment of what is better than in his previous plans. More transmission lines in the US, next to highway and rail that would avoid a bunch of bureaucratic issues, something from Bernie Sanders' plan. High-speed rail got replaced with higher-speed freight. High-speed rail is a waste with Hyperloop on the horizon, so if he's not investing as much in that, that's good. Decarbonization, a carbon-neutral energy sector by 2035, complete climate neutrality by 2050, federal procurement of current solutions. A lot of funding in his previous plan was for research. A good portion has now been transferred to actually investing in current generation solutions. Both still only get a total of $400 billion, but it's still better than before. Reformed and extended tax incentives. I mean, that speaks for itself. Good for the private sector, although would be up to Congress and Senate, and is not something that can be done by executive order. Zero-emission transits for cities 100,000 people and up. Good stuff, highly needed. 500,000 electric charging stations. Good, but good to see how much will go to slow chargers at the mall and how much will go to fast chargers like Ionity on highways, freeways, and interstates. A ton of support for American electric vehicles, and since he specifically said retooling factories for EVs, it's clear that most of that help will go to the Detroit automakers. Then there are some bad things that transferred from the old plans. Small modular reactors, right, that is dead, and for the next 50 years at least, not really viable. Carbon capture. I mean, the investments in a technology are expensive, but in the end will be necessary in the long term, though the tens of billions of trees he wants to plant are not all that helpful in a climate that burns more often and more severely each year. Green hydrogen. Some people still think it will happen. For large ships, airplanes, and maybe trucks it could happen, but a pretty big waste of money at this point because of the enormous infrastructure costs required for it. Investment in grid-scale batteries that are cheaper and longer lasting than lithium ion. Michael points out in his article that pumped hydro could do that pretty well if we develop plenty of other power sources to use during the day. I mean, what is wrong with lithium ion batteries, really? Decarbonizing the military. Well, the bad apple here is that he didn't mention it before and he didn't mention it now either. To me, it feels like the plan lacks focus and is just meant to tick the boxes and get Joe Biden elected, whatever you care about, be it climate or jobs, take your pick. But it could be worse, like the 500-page Democratic plan that actually talks about keeping some fossil fuels and just compensating for it with carbon capture. I mean, that plan does not even deserve a deep dive. So, like I said, could be worse. If you want a good concrete plan, definitely take a look at the IEA plan that we covered in another video a couple of weeks back. Now, that's a good plan. Methane emissions. So there was this story in the news this week. It was actually republished by multiple news outlets that if we don't curb our methane emissions, we might still hit 3 to 4 degrees of warming instead of the 1.5 mandated by the Paris Climate Accords. Now, obviously, as a quick reminder, while methane only stays in the atmosphere for 20 years, in a time it's there, it's 30 times as potent as CO2. So it's still a pretty big problem. But essentially, there was nothing new in these articles. They also again mentioned that agriculture and fossil fuels are responsible for the methane emissions, basically on an equal amount. Some argue that one emits more than the other, but in the end, that all doesn't matter because all the fossil fuel methane emissions need to be eliminated entirely, and the agriculture emissions, they cannot be emitted entirely unless you start doing some pretty drastic things like growing rice in wet fields under glass greenhouses and filter the methane. Same goes for cows and all the other mammals. So chicken is not as much of a problem. But basically what scientists are currently trying to do to see if they can help with the methane problem is to play with the diets of these mammals, especially cows, see if they can reduce the methane emissions that way. And while I'm sure they'll be somewhat successful, it's a stopgap measure at best. I'm really looking forward to the global expansion of companies like Impossible Foods and seeing cultivated meat, also known as lab-grown meat, to actually enter the market. And until those things really take over, we may have to alter our diet somewhat in the meantime. Elon's Giga Berlin comments. So let's start this off with something that's not actually a comment, although some might argue it's at least 1,000 words. Because Elon Musk posted on Twitter a picture of what phase 1 of Giga Berlin factory will look like. And it's just absolutely astonishing. Having seen the current plans for phase 1 and seeing that little building right there showed that as massive as it looks, this is just the beginning. He also answered some Twitter questions. Yes, these are solar panels. There are chimneys, but they are hidden. And Elon's planned rave cave became an indoor-outdoor rave space on the roof, and might even have a swimming pool. Oh, Elon. However, the next part of the story is actually more Model Y news, because in response to a news story about Volvo wanting to reverse engineer the Model Y, he said something pretty exciting about Giga Berlin. Elon said that the Berlin Model Y is the one to watch. That is a revolution in automotive body engineering, finally. This can mean one of 3 things. Right now, the rear bottom part of the Model Y is basically one huge injection mold where it was 70 parts in the Model 3. It's possible that Tesla will do that for the front of the Model Y as well, although it could also mean, as shown in this Tesla patent, the vehicle will be a unibody cast, a single piece. Then the third possibility is that the Giga Berlin Model Y will finally have the flex wire technology that will significantly shorter the amount of wire needed to get the job done. It will also make the wiring redundant in case something goes wrong. The signal will go the other way around, and it can be installed by robots, which furthers Elon Musk's goals of automation. Now, there is one more possibility, though it's unlikely that Elon Musk was referring to this, but earlier he did say that the Giga Berlin will have the most advanced paint shop yet. But he already mentioned that earlier, so probably not that. Tesla stock. So this week was actually quite exciting for Tesla stock, or you could also say it was pretty nerve-wracking for the shareholders, which includes me. I own about, full disclosure, I own about half a dozen shares, and anything I say on the YouTube channel is not investment advice. This week, however, Tesla jumped up to $1,791 per share. It appeared to have stabilized for a while and then slowly tumbled down again to something around 1,500, below the point where it started that day. In that short time, however, Tesla's market cap jumped up above $300 billion and was suddenly more valuable than the second, third, and fourth most valuable automakers combined. Now it's worth only more than the second and third biggest automakers combined, which is still a lot. But really, I think that Tesla has the potential to reach a market cap that beats Apple's trillion-dollar valuation. And same is true for SpaceX when they finally go public. Now, to quickly round up this news story, why exactly did Tesla's stock skyrocket like that? And anecdotal evidence points to two potential reasons. The first are rumors of S&P 500 inclusion that would unlock a lot of potential new capital and investments into the stock. And the other rumor comes from China. Apparently, there are some rumors that Tesla was talking to the Chinese government about building a second factory, though those rumors seem a bit premature at the moment. But really, stock volatility is nothing new for Tesla, as are some pretty serious attempts at shorting and manipulating that stock. But I will remind you that right now, out of all of the TSLA analysts, only 2 or 3 were more successful than if you simply buy low and hold. Yeah. Lightspeed stories, Tesla edition, starting with Model Y price reduction, standard range cancellation. Tesla has lowered the price of the Model Y long range to $49,990 and the performance version to $59,990. The second part of this news is that the standard range Model Y is cancelled. There will still be a cheaper rear-wheel drive version, but that's it. A move that makes sense to me. I mean, there's no practical reason to absolutely need a Model Y if you're short on money. And the Model 3, it's a fantastic car. Also, if they do make a short range Model Y, it'll have even less range than the standard range plus Model 3. There's no need to go there. I mean, if you can find a single good reason why you absolutely would need a Model Y standard range, please let me know down in the comments below, but I can't think of any good reasons. Let me add to that this. Once the Model 3 gets the octo valve, it'll be even better. It'll have also more range, especially in colder climates. And the final thing is that when Tesla releases their next generation of batteries and they start entering the Model 3 and Model Y, the current long range will basically become standard range. Maybe they will even keep the long range name and just scrap the standard range name at all and just call the new one super long range. You would still have a fantastic car and a cheaper Model Y. Autopilot Level 5 autonomy this year. This week, Elon Musk took part in the World AI Conference, appearing from an office of some sort and saying the following words. I'm extremely confident that Level 5, or essentially complete autonomy, will happen, and I think will happen very quickly. And I think Tesla, I feel like we are very close to Level 5 autonomy. I think I remain confident that we will have the basic functionality for Level 5 autonomy complete this year. A lot of people are misinterpreting this. He doesn't actually mean that the Tesla will be Level 5 autonomously safe, which is the true definition of Level 5 autonomy. He means that the Autopilot will be feature complete and will be able to continue now to learn to get to Level 5. One thing, however, that is worth mentioning is that right now, Tesla Autopilot does not appear to be that much different than simple lane keeping technology other automakers are starting to roll out. But the technologies behind the two systems are very different, and when non-highway autonomy rolls out, in one day, Tesla will show just how far ahead of the competition they truly are. Autopilot wording in Germany. The German courts, however, are not as enthusiastic about Autopilot as Elon is, because they just ruled that Tesla's commentary on Autopilot is misleading. Now, I get where they're coming from. I mean, trying to claim in 2019 that Teslas will be Level 5 autonomous by the end of the year, not exactly the case. It would have been more accurate to say that Tesla's vehicles are Level 5 autonomy capable in the future. Though what people's issue is with the word Autopilot in general is a bit unclear. I mean, even in aviation, where the word comes from, Autopilot does not mean full self-flying. So where that problem comes from, it's a bit unclear. Austin Gigafactory incentives approved. While it is still currently undecided where Tesla will build their next Gigafactory, whether it's Austin or Tulsa, something interesting did happen today. The Travis County approved a huge incentive package for the Tesla Gigafactory. One that will give Tesla tax rebates for maintenance and operations property taxes. 70% rebates for the first $1 billion invested, 75% for the second $1 billion invested, and 80% for every $1 billion that will follow after that. Now, unfortunately, there are currently no public numbers estimating how much money this would actually save Tesla per year, or in general. News at light speed, the non-Tesla stories, starting with Nissan transitions to CCS for US and Europe. So this story is very much related to the Nissan Arya announcement, but it has much broader implications than just that vehicle. You see, the Nissan Arya will have a CCS port for charging in Europe and in North America, unlike the CHAdeMO port that the Nissan Leaf currently uses and Mitsubishi PHEV vehicles like the popular Outlander. Now, the current Nissan Leaf will still have a CHAdeMO port, but if they ever do decide to make a next generation Leaf, it will also transition to CCS. Though interestingly, some are speculating that the Leaf might actually be done for, and even more interestingly so, the fact that Nissan won't be using the CHAdeMO port in Europe and in North American markets anymore basically is a huge blow to the CHAdeMO port standard, because right now, the only other places it will still be used are China and Japan, and CCS definitely seems to is now going to become more dominant in both the European and North American markets. In some ways, this is a good thing because we want to have the same charging standard everywhere. But on the other hand, CHAdeMO, especially their latest generation, does have certain benefits like bidirectional charging, which would be pretty cool to have. Although, it's not everything it's hyped to be. Volkswagen Dieselgate Ramifications. Dieselgate. Some people might start forgetting about it, but its ramifications are still slowly rippling through society. The state of Virginia got a whopping $93.6 million in a settlement with Volkswagen. And this week, the state announced that $14 million of that are going to go towards the port to buy 2 new electric cranes. Ports in the US have some of the dirtiest air around because all of the cranes and transportation in there is all diesel powered. Though this investment is only part of a multi-year $800 million expansion, and from what we gather, the port is still not entirely diesel free. And to read more about that, make sure to check out the article in CleanTechnica that has a lot more details about it. Volkswagen head of software fired. If you remember some weeks ago, in a previous news show, I covered a pretty ridiculous quote from the head of software development at Volkswagen, Christian Senger, which shows that he really has absolutely no idea about software development whatsoever. And, I suggested back then that maybe he should have been the one to be fired rather than the CEO, Herbert Diess, that actually spearheaded electrification at Volkswagen. Well, guess what? This week, Volkswagen announced that they dropped him. A pretty good decision. EV sales in France. French cars sell pretty well in France. Go figure. This month was again huge for the Renault Zoe, though the Peugeot 208 EV is not doing that great. Especially when you compare it with the total sales of 2020, where the 208 sells almost half as many as Renault sells Zoes. Although the Model 3 pops up in this view again, but not in huge numbers. However, considering how few service centers Tesla service centers France has, I can't really blame them. Fisker. The guy in charge of it was once part of Tesla some 8 or so years ago, but left with grand promises of doing better than Tesla ever could. And after a lot of different prototypes, promises, empty promises, patents, they finally might actually bring an electric vehicle to the market. Although it is based on the Volkswagen MEB platform. And if that is not embarrassing enough, here is a quote by a Volkswagen executive on the topic. Volkswagen is still open to support small series projects that demonstrate the variety of conceivable concepts based on the MEB platform through their emotional appearance. Ouch. Now that's what I call a cherry on top. Honda and CATL sign battery deal. Honda and CATL have signed a battery agreement that obviously includes the batteries themselves, as well as other next-generation fundamental technologies, whatever that means. The two companies also plan to discuss potential second life projects, as well as the possibility of recycling the products at the end of life. Now, the first Honda vehicle to use a CATL battery will enter the Chinese market in 2022, and they expect to roll out this partnership internationally as well in the years after that. Honda now owns 1% of CATL through shares that were sold privately to them, not on the public market. And one thing that is a bit sad, they didn't mention how many batteries Honda would be buying, and a gigawatt hour per year number would be pretty useful. And that was it for this week's news show. We hope that you guys liked it, and if you did, please consider sharing it with your friends that care about clean tech, maybe on social media, and give this video a thumbs up because that would really help us along. Now, almost all of the stories that we cover in the news show, we try to write articles about, and links to those can be found in the first comment down below. And you know, those articles are sometimes in much greater depth than we can cover in the news show, so make sure to check those out. And other than that, I wish you guys a wonderful weekend. Till next time, see ya.